The jump shot is a very important weapon in an arsenal of a competitive pool player. Having effective jump shot technique can get you out of all sorts of trouble and help you win games. In this video, I cover everything you need to know to be an effective jumper. Let's start with the basics. For a jump shot to be legal, you must strike down on the cue ball, causing it to bounce off the table. It is illegal to scoop under the ball like this. It's very easy to get good jump height with this approach, but it is a foul. A jump shot is a good choice in a situation like this where I need to pocket the 8 for the win and all kick shot paths are blocked. A jump shot is much easier with a jump cue, which has a hard phenolic tip and is shorter, stiffer, and lighter than a regular playing cue. I don't show it throughout the video, but it is very important to chalk up before every jump shot, especially when you plan to strike the cue ball off center. The hard phenolic tip does not hold chalk as well as a leather tip, so extra care is required. Jump cues come in 2 or more pieces to make them more portable. This one comes in 3 pieces to make it easier to use different jump shot techniques. The full length is more appropriate for a standard underhand stroke where the grip hand is farther back. And the shorter length is better for an overhand dart stroke where the grip is much farther up. Let's start with easy jump shots. If you think you haven't executed a jump shot before, you are probably wrong because the cue ball hops anytime you hit it above center or when the back of the cue is elevated to reach over the rails or obstructing balls. Here's an example follow shot bridging from the rail. The cue is elevated some and the tip is aimed above center. Notice how much the cue ball hops. In some game situations, we only need to jump over part of a ball. Here's an example shooting at the 8. The gap between the stripes is a little too narrow for the cue ball to clear, but with an elevated cue and firm stroke, the cue ball easily jumps through the gap. Here, I am using my normal carbon fiber playing cue with a center ball hit. With a jump cue instead, I wouldn't need to elevate the cue as much. So you see, it is not that difficult to do a baby jump, even with a regular playing cue. So even if you play in an APA league where jump cues are not allowed, you still might be able to get out of trouble like this using a baby jump shot. Here's another example where I only need to clear over part of a ball. This time, I'm using my break cue with a phenolic tip, which makes the jump a little easier. I easily got enough jump height to clear the obstacle. If you instead need to jump over an entire ball, you need to elevate the back of the cue more. It is possible to use a playing cue or break cue to jump over an entire ball, but a jump cue makes it much easier. A 45-degree elevation angle and center ball hit works best for normal jumps like this. I easily got enough jump height to clear the ball. If you have never hit a jump shot like this before, the first thing you need to know is you cannot use your normal stance position. If you do, when you try to elevate, you will be leaning forward too much and it will be very difficult to elevate the cue enough, especially if you are not very tall. Instead, you want to move everything forward as you elevate. Notice that my grip chokes up on the cue also. Here, I am in my normal arm-body configuration with my forearm in a vertical plane perpendicular to the cue. Notice how little effort is required with the stroke. The jump is a finesse shot, not a power shot. If you start with your feet closer to the shot, you can just pivot everything forward, putting most of your weight on the front foot. To elevate even more, you need to choke up on the grip and pivot forward more, getting your head over the cue ball. Also notice how the bridge arm elbow flexes more as you elevate. If you are shorter and it is difficult keeping your stroking arm in the vertical plane, especially at high cue elevations, an alternative technique is to rotate your arm out to the side. That was a little awkward for me since I haven't practiced it much, but as long as you keep your body and upper arm still during the stroke, you can be effective with this technique also. Here's another view showing how everything comes up together as I elevate. Notice how I keep my head over the cue the whole time in my normal vision center position. To jump effectively, you need to have your bridge hand as high and stable as possible. Notice how I spread and flex my fingers a little and raise and curl my thumb. If your fingers are not very long, when you need to elevate more, it can also help to get more vertical on the index finger and turn your hand like this, still using the other fingers for support. The goal is to have your stroke length be as long as possible so you can generate enough cue speed for effective jump action. If you have trouble forming an elevated bridge, it can help to do it step by step like this. First plant your index finger vertically. Then place the other fingers as spread out as possible to provide stable support. Then raise and curl your thumb as much as you can to provide a secure guide for the cue. An alternative bridge some people prefer is what I call the Longhorns or bullshit bridge. It doesn't work as well for me, but some people like it better. Whenever possible, and when first learning, bridge off the rail. This allows for a longer stroke length, which makes it easier to accelerate the cue up to speed. Notice how I grab the nose of the cushion with my fingers to stabilize the bridge as much as possible. The key to the jump stroke is keeping your grip and wrist relaxed and using a quick throwing motion like this. Don't be afraid to accelerate into the cue ball as if you are trying to throw the cue into the table. Again, strive for a light, relaxed, smooth, and accelerating throwing motion. A good way to practice the technique is with what I call air strokes, like this. Notice how relaxed my grip and wrist are. Again, the jump stroke is more about finesse, not power. A good way to check jump shot aim is to first form your elevated stance. Then drop down, keeping your bridge hand still. Then, in the horizontal position where you can most clearly see the required line of aim, make alignment and bridge corrections if necessary. Then rotate everything straight up, again with the bridge still, to maintain the accurate aim. Generally, with an elevated shot like a jump, it is better to focus on the cue ball during the stroke since the tip contact point on the ball is so critical. It is also important to keep your head, body, and bridge hand still with intense focus during the stroke. Do you see how my head, body, and bridge have still not moved after the hit? If you don't hit the cue ball on its vertical center line, it will not go straight. Here, my tip hit a little to the right of center, causing the cue ball to swerve to my right. Again, align the tip carefully and have intense focus on the cue ball during the stroke to keep everything straight. Here's another example showing how badly you can miss a jump if the cue tip is not perfectly centered. Here, my tip hits to the left of center, causing swerve to my left. Again, check the aim carefully. Make sure your vision center is aligned with the shot line. Verify the tip is on the vertical center line of the cue ball. Focus on the cue ball during the stroke, and stay down and still. Now, sometimes hitting the jump shot off center can be used to your benefit, as with this jump massé shot. A better play here is just a regular massé shot. If you want to learn how to aim and execute these types of shots, see the link in the video description. If there were other balls blocking kick and easy massé shot options, the jump massé might be the best option. Besides not hitting the cue ball on the vertical center line and not having your vision center over the cue, the biggest mistake people make with the jump shot is trying to muscle the shot with shoulder motion and elbow drop like this. Remember, stay relaxed, be still, and use a finesse throwing motion. In general, the regular underhand jump stroke I just covered is more accurate, but some people find the overhand dart stroke easier to learn. It is also sometimes a better choice, especially when you need to reach for a shot or when you need a highly elevated cue to jump higher or land sooner like this. Here's an example where, because I need to reach out onto the table and where a quick jump and landing are required, the regular stroke can be awkward. Again, if you have a 3-piece jump cue, the dart stroke will be easier if you remove the third piece. This stroke is called the dart stroke because the grip and stroking motion are very similar to how you hold and throw a dart. Imagine holding and throwing the cue like a dart and just bring the cue down. It is that simple, assuming you have thrown a dart before. The grip consists of your thumb, index finger, and middle finger. It is best to have all 3 fingers on the same part of the cue like this. That makes it easy to keep the cue straight during the throwing motion. If your fingers are instead on different parts of the cue, it is much more difficult to keep it stroking straight. As with all pool shots, it is also important to have your personal vision center aligned with the shot aiming line. For more information, see the link in the video description. You don't want your head off to the side like this. Instead, you want your vision center over the line of the shot. You can focus on the object ball or cue ball during the stroke, but just as with the regular jump stroke, it is generally better to focus on the cue ball to ensure cue-tip contact point accuracy. With a shot like this, the cue ball tends to pick up topspin on the bounces, so a scratch is possible. Even though I hit the cue ball below center and it started out with backspin, it had full topspin roll after bouncing forward to the object ball. You can just aim to cheat the pocket slightly to avoid the possible scratch. With the dart stroke, you want the grip hand as far in front as possible. Here, I am pushing it up until I pass the balance point in the cue, then I back up a little. As with the regular jump stroke, the dart stroke is a finesse throwing motion with a light grip and wrist. You don't want to move your whole arm like this. Instead, plant your elbow against your body and use mostly the wrist with just a little forearm motion. Do you see how relaxed and effortless the stroke is? With the dart stroke, you don't want your body too close to the shot. This puts your arm in an awkward and constrained position. Instead, get your body and feet as far back as possible with the grip and cue as far forward in front of you as possible. This makes the dart stroke more natural, just as with throwing a dart. You can also control the cue ball when executing jump shots. Follow shots are easy because the cue ball naturally picks up topspin on each bounce, even with a near center ball hit. To get a stop shot, you need to hit below center. The backspin is lost during the first and subsequent bounces, resulting in stun at the object ball. To draw the ball, the cue ball must be struck well below center and it must land on or close to the object ball to limit backspin losses during bounces. Did you see the cue ball land close to the object ball so it wouldn't lose backspin with multiple hops? It is easy to get draw with a baby jump. I am using my playing cue and stroking just like I would stroke any draw shot. The only difference is the back of the cue is elevated to get the cue ball to jump through the ball gap. It is more difficult to draw when jumping over an entire ball, but it is possible with a low enough hit and if you don't give the cue ball room to bounce multiple times, where it would lose the spin. In this section, I look at the effect of cue elevation, shot speed, and cut angle on jump shots. Since I planned to jump many balls from the same position in this section, I taped down a piece of spare cloth to protect the table's cloth. First, let's look at the effect of speed. With more shot speed, the cue ball jumps longer and higher. At a similar cue elevation but more speed, the cue ball jumps longer and higher. And with more speed still, the cue ball goes even longer and higher. With more cue elevation, the cue ball jumps higher and lands sooner. At a similar speed but higher elevation, the cue ball jumps higher and sooner. And with even more elevation, the cue ball goes even higher and shorter. As you increase cue elevation, you need to aim the tip lower to give the cue ball enough room to clear. Center ball works fine for an average elevation. At higher elevations, it is better to target the resting point at the bottom of the ball. And at even higher elevations, you need to aim in front of the resting point. At extremely high elevations, it can be difficult to get enough stroke length, in which case it can help to bridge on a leg on top of the table. Now let's look at the effect of cut angle and cue ball object ball contact height. If you jump to land right at the object ball, the shot cuts at the expected angle. But if the cue ball hits the object ball while airborne, either on the fly or after a bounce, the object ball will be cut more than expected. If you jump too far, the object ball can even be cut backwards. Here's an example game situation where a back cut is necessary to avoid hitting the 7 ball first and to cut the 10 into the side. When jumping a long distance, you need to be careful to land the cue ball soon enough. If you don't, the cue ball or object ball can hop off the table, which is a foul, giving your opponent ball in hand. Here, by using more cue elevation, the cue ball hops higher and lands sooner, preventing the foul. Let's end with some useful jump shot practice advice. First, start off bridging from the rail where you have a longer bridge length to accelerate the cue more easily. Also, start with baby jumps, where you just need to clear between 2 obstacle balls, starting with a ball's width gap. Be sure to use a spare piece of cloth to protect the table's cloth, and start with a break cue if you have one. If not, just use a playing cue. After you master the full gap, narrow the gap some and increase the cue elevation a little. And then narrow and elevate more. Eventually, try to clear over an entire ball. If you have trouble doing this with a break cue, switch to a jump cue, which will be much easier, requiring less stroke effort. Then move the cue ball closer, which will require more cue elevation and more cue speed. Looking at the used spare piece of cloth, you can see the marks the cue ball makes with jump shots. We use the spare piece of cloth because none of the marks will appear on the table's cloth. This is what it looks like where I hit many shots from the same area of the table earlier without using a jump cloth. I hope this video helps you jump like a pro. With a little practice, it is not as hard as it might look.
We're talking about practice. Not a game. We're talking about practice.
If you want more help and supporting resources, see the links in the video description. Stick around and enjoy the shot montage I put together from this video and from many pro jump shot examples, also linked in the video description. Good luck with your jump shot and your game from Dr. Dave.